It is Monday on Daily Delivery. Patrick Reusse with me. I'm Michael Rand. We got a lot to get to today. We got to wrap up the Viking season, Patrick. I think I said on X, which we used to call Twitter, which I still call Twitter usually, that sometimes, Patrick, when we get to the end of a Viking season, it just feels a little sad. There's no more football, things like that. I don't feel like that about this year. I'm just ready to get this, ready to move on from this one and see what happens next. I don't need to watch any more of this team's games. Let's talk Gopher basketball in a bit. The death of former Twins manager Billy Gardner. Got some hockey talk too, but yeah, let's start with Vikings today, Patrick. Do you feel the same way as I do that good riddance to 2023 Vikings?
Yes, and I bet Nick Mullins feels the same way after getting hit 15 times
Yeah,
yesterday. Man alive. The guy, you got to give him credit. He throws some interceptions, but he threw for 800 yards against Detroit in two
he
games.
did. Yeah,
He's, he keeps hanging in there. But man, the first half, I thought they were going to kill him. Whoever they had playing on that offensive line, who really flattened out the last 4 or 5 games. He must not have been healthy. It's all his Darrisaw.
Darisaw. Yeah,
He was being rated as the best left tackle in the league, but he couldn't block anybody either. And yeah, it was. Somebody did me a favor on Twitter, right?
yes,
Send me a tweet that I sent last year at Christmas after they pulled out another one of those victories. I said on Twitter, remember how much fun you're having next year, and don't whine about this team being 6-11. Six
pretty
and 11.
close.
And if the Raiders had only had a little bit of offense, I could have
Right.
nailed it. But I said all along that the football gods are good to you one year, they won't be that good the next. And between injuries and O'Connell, Mark Craig's today's piece had some great numbers on what happened to their running game, and
Yeah.
it was like the Detroit is top five in both running and passing, and offense had some balance, and this one was just absolutely. And Craig pointed out that they were talking about in training camp having a more balanced running attack, and they
Right.
they ended up Alexander Madison had a horrible year, and then they took a long time to switch to Chandler, and then last time they played Detroit, we both talked about it. They only ran 11 times, which
Unbelievable.
of
Yeah.
course allowed the Detroit offense to have the ball all night long. So yeah, it was a good season to come to an end. And but I think overall, I was happy they lost yesterday. They're going to draft 10, 11, or
I think
12.
it's I think it's
They're going to
11. I think it's 11th they're locked into now. I think
it's
Better wrote
already
that.
at 11th. You don't even have to trade up. You can trade up from 11th, but you don't even have to trade up to get a quarterback. They're going to be one of those five guys will be available. You can probably get Penix at 11. Let's do it. You can bring back Nick Mullins as your backup. You don't have to look around. He'll throw some interceptions, and he's a little loosey goosey. But what the heck? You got your veteran who can be the backup, and you got get Penix in here, and let's go. Come on, Kirk, it was fun knowing you, but we can't afford to let everybody else go in order to pay you $35 million or whatever it's going to be. So I don't trust him, though. I don't trust him not to sign Cousins.
Right. I know.
I
The funny thing about Mullins, I'll get back to that point in a minute. I just not knowing who he was, not knowing him until he had to play here this year. I remember obviously when he was on San Francisco, I didn't really watch those games. I just assumed he was just like one of those nice game manager backup types. He is
yeah,
absolutely not that. He is.
no,
Well,
oh
didn't he
God,
break all of
no.
Favre's records in Mississippi? I think he
Oh
broke all
yeah,
of Favre's records there.
he's a gunslinger
He,
without a gunslinger without a
he's a
fastball.
gunslinger without a gun. He's just
he
throwing
can
bullets.
do, he throws it all over, and he doesn't have much zip on it, but
No.
he'll get rid of it, man, and he'll stand in there and get pounded and get up again. Trouble with him is if you would like bring in a younger quarterback and say, well, let this guy start and then replace him at game 6 or something,
Right.
he'd get killed before then, because he had one sack in the first quarter. I was watching it. What are you waiting for? You can't stand there for 8 seconds.
Right.
They're going to come and kill you. they're, I mean, but he's kind of comical, and he's in his confidence in himself and
Right.
everything is pretty humorous. I didn't see any great quotes from him, but this time, last couple of times he had some great quotes. I'm surprised he didn't come out and rip Jared Hall. And why do you have that guy stiff playing instead of me? I'm pretty good.
Right.
I, I kind of he's my new player of the year. I thought he was hilarious, just the way he reacted to everything, if I can't believe they're going to bring Cousins back, but there's so much pressure locally, and this whole idea that we talked about it all last week. There's no sense in going in again. But what do you accomplish? What do you think you're gonna? You think this team is gonna be ready to win next year? You were 2-6 at home, for goodness sakes.
Yes, and you were 1-4 when everybody was healthy. There's problems on this roster. They were getting better when Cousins was playing well, and they were starting to figure some things out. But even if Cousins stayed healthy all this year, this team's ceiling was making the playoffs as a wild card and probably losing in the first round. And that's what their ceiling is always going to be until they do an actual kind of remaking and get some more talent here. I think I tweeted yesterday, this is an uncompetitive non-rebuild is what this is.
Yeah,
This is not a competitive rebuild. This is neither. And I've also come to this conclusion that Justin Jefferson is playing his butt off when he came back from injury. We had 12 for 192 in a meaningless game. He deserves better than all this. He deserves. He deserves to get paid for sure. He deserves better than a mediocre roster. They got to do. If they're going to build around him and keep him, which I'm not 1,000% convinced that they wouldn't talk themselves into. Hey, let's trade Justin Jefferson and get the boatload of picks and then get going that way. But if they're going to keep him, he deserves better. They got to get something going around him.
Yeah, and the boatload of picks is, you get another number one and 2 twos or something like that, right? Maybe two number ones in a 4-year period or something. But it's not worth it. Keep the guy; he's unbelievable.
Give Kwesi a chance to pick 3 more defensive backs that can't play. I mean,
yeah. Oh man, alive! How about this? This Evans kid, they took him out of the game. They took him out of the game twice in a row. They hooked him. Brian Flores was having none of them. But yeah, they didn't have the defensive backs to start with, and then about 2 or 3 of them got hurt. And, that's the whole deal with football. You can all the best made plans. Who's going to get hurt? That's it. Last year they were really healthy. This year I think even healthy this year they wouldn't have been they would have been, as you said, they would have been a 500 team and playing on the road in the playoffs. But that this just was a year that last year everything went right. This year everything went wrong. So yeah, that's the way it goes. But I'm just phenomenal. To me, the most phenomenal stat of all is, and we talked last week, is 2-6 at home.
2-6 at home.
That's hard to do, man. That's hard to do.
No, it is, and it's just. I hope they take an honest reckoning and look at this roster. That was what I was worried about last year. Like you go 13-4, even when you know in your heart of hearts that there's a lot of mirages to that, right? If you're a data person like Kwesi or even O'Connell, you know that you're not going to go 11-0 in 1-score games again. Even if you think you're special, even if you think that you have some sort of end of the game kind of moxie and whatever it is, the character of the team, you know that the odds are you're probably going to go more like 500 in those games because they're just coin flips. But when you go 13-4, it prevents you to a small degree, at least, from just saying, we're just not that good. You talk yourself into, maybe we should try this again. And that's kind of what happened this year.
Yeah. I don't think, after 13-4, you can't say, well, we got to rebuild this thing. I mean, I think you pretty much had to take this shot there, and it turned out it was a complete failure. So, they knew that when they were 1-4 that this was a completely different year. And now you look around the conference, though, all of a sudden the usually rotten NFC North, and it's been mediocre for at least the last couple of years. Now you're the fourth best team in the
Yes.
league.
Yes.
With your personnel, you got the fourth best personnel in the NFC North. So
And the
obviously
Bears are about to
Detroit's
drop.
better.
Yeah.
The Bears are probably going to trade Fields and get Caleb Williams, or do
Yep.
the opposite to keep Justin Fields has played pretty good the second half of the year. So
Yeah, they got to get rid of him. They got to go with Caleb Williams. I think that's a
yeah, I do
no-brainer.
too. I do. Yeah, probably is. But can you imagine the heat they'll get if Justin Fields goes someplace and plays good, and Williams needs 2 years to get better?
Yeah,
But
that's true.
I mean, they didn't get any points yesterday. So I mean, Fields makes mistakes, but you know, I'd take him here, but not for
Yeah,
one of these
right.
quarterbacks. You know,
Right.
if I was drafting 20th or something, I could. What do you think they'll get for him? Somebody will give him a one, right? Somebody
For Fields, I don't know about that. He just hasn't done it. He hasn't done enough to justify that. He's still got value. He's getting better, but I don't think he's all that good. I think
somebody like New England or somebody's going to
yeah,
have to do something. Although they're going to draft so high that
they can get
unbelievable.
their quarterback too. But
It
yeah,
will be interesting. This will be an interesting day, a Monday, with see who's out the door, including Belichick probably. Huh?
yeah,
What manager? I don't think the guy in Atlanta is going to be around. There'll probably be 7 or 8 of them fired again, right? So
could be.
anyway,
It sets up to be a pretty important 2024 for the guys here too, right? I mean,
oh yeah, right. Yeah, what are they gonna make the move? Are they gonna go? They certainly can't bring it all back. What do you think about Hunter too? I wouldn't be surprised if they don't sign him.
I mean, I think they will try, but it's a two-way street, and I don't think Hunter's been happy here for a few years, so he's got incredible value now after having a really good year. He had 16 and a half sacks.
And you don't have to give, and who's getting him doesn't have to give you anything. So what was the advantage of that deal they gave him to take away any chance you had to have any control after this year? What was the advantage of that?
I don't know. Maybe
Did
it was
feel like they got him cheap or something,
or just like kept him happy enough that you could try to have him this year. They kind of did the same thing with Cousins. They kind of put themselves in this spot where they had to make a decision after this year. And if they're being honest again, even if they looked at the injuries and said, hey, we got hit at the end of the year with that, you can't look at this team and say, if we brought it all back, this would be a team that could contend, would have a window of contention. It's just not honest. They've got to, I'd love if they could keep Hunter, but what do you do then at that point? Is that, how expensive is that? How does that fit into the big picture plan? I think someone from, I don't know if I think it was one of the kind of salary cap websites projected they're going to have $27 million in cap space going into this offseason, which goes in a hurry. And they basically said they're in no man's land in terms of kind of where their roster is. And it's kind of true.
And I did hear this discussion. I guess it was on K-Fan after the game yesterday. I love to listen to the wine lines after the losses, but somebody was making the point that Flores would rather have a kind of an outside guy than a pure pass rusher like Hunter is too. So more of the outside linebacker,
true
type
outside
of
linebacker,
pass rusher. So if that's the case, then maybe Hunter's there. But boy, that would be a tough give up to just let a guy like that go without not getting anything.
Who's going to rush the passer if he's not here? Jeez.
Craig let him have it pretty good today on the Davenport signing compared to all the other signings. What a disaster! I had no idea they paid this guy $13 million.
Yes, it was amazing. There was no need. He had half a sack last year. He doesn't stay healthy. What was that?
I don't know, but whatever guy was all in on getting him should be fired. Really? I mean, whatever scout or personnel guy, that can't be just Kwesi thinking he's a genius. No. It has to be somebody giving him a big advice. This is who we need. Whoever said that should be fired because that guy's, I think they got another. They have an option on him or something. I don't think that's going to be extended.
No.
I
Yeah.
mean, he was just a guy that had no interest in playing the way it looked.
No.
I don't. Football is such a brutal game. You don't know, who's
Right.
hurt, who's not, and who says that's enough. I always go back to '84. Les Steckles last year,
Mm.
one year, the last 4 games, anybody got a stub toe, they didn't play. They had them
Right.
jumping
Like we're
out.
done.
They were jumping off that ship like unbelievable. Nobody was playing by the end of it, and it never got that bad this year. But I wonder I wonder how O'Connell reflects. He seems to be I think he's a self-critical type of guy. So I bet he's wondering about himself after this year
I think
too,
he
because he
is.
did not have nearly as good a year. And I think
No.
he's an honest guy in that sense that, this isn't as easy as I thought it was last year, buddy.
Right.
That's just, which is, I think the 7-10 is way more legitimate than the 13-4 last year.
It's a
I
lot
don't know where
it's a
that
lot
came.
closer to the truth. I mean, if
Yes.
if they were telling the truth about both years, there probably would have been 9-8 last year and 8-9 this year, right? Like that feels like it's
Uh,
about right there. This is a team that, you know, not even necessarily at its best, but at its average was average. That's kind
yeah.
of what they were. And last year they got all the breaks and won all those weird games and stayed relatively healthy at the right spots. And this year they didn't.
Yeah. Yes, and everybody's talking about double-figure losses. First time, I don't know how many times
Since
in
13, I
franchise,
think.
but we got to keep remembering we're playing more games than we ever played.
Yes, that's
The
true.
real accomplishment was those early years when they were losing 10 in a 14-game
With only
schedule.
14. Yeah.
That was the real accomplishment when you only played 14. That's a pet peeve of mine that we.
Yeah.
It's like saying Fleck's the first coach to win 9 games in consecutive seasons.
Right, right.
Okay. So Bernie Bierman winning 3 straight national championships, going 8-0, was not as good as an accomplishment as this, you idiots. So that gets me going. I mean, you look back at the Minneapolis Lakers, they played 60 games. They didn't play
Right.
82.
Right.
And then to win the championship, they played 6 one year,
I know.
or
It's
something.
amazing.
So we give a lot of credit to numbers that somehow, and the NFL pays no attention to the fact that their schedule is 3 games longer than it used to be, and 5 games longer than it was before they started expanding in 1961. So you gotta put those. You got to put some reality into these numbers. But anyway, I would say, where do you rank it as a Viking follower for your 20 some years of sports consciousness? So
Yeah.
where would this be as flops go?
I don't even see this as that much of a flop. I just wasn't that confident in this team. I didn't think they were that good at the beginning. I think we all of the they have us do like the Star Tribune predictions at the start of the year. And I
Yeah.
predicted they go 7-10 last year, and
Did you
I
really?
caught a lot last
So,
year. Last year, this
okay.
year, I was like, no, this team's not good. Then they won 13 games, and I was like, well, I can't be that pessimistic this year. But
Yeah.
I still had them going 9-8. I had them like the worst of all of our prognosticators. Most people were like
Mhm.
11-6, 10-7. I was like, I just don't think they're that good. I was like, yeah. I think at the end of the year, they're probably going to be battling for that 7 seed, and that's kind of what they were doing. And then injuries. I mean, if we're being honest, like injuries did hurt them the last 3 games. Like
Yes.
Hawkinson, Byron Murphy, not having enough pass rush. Obviously, Cousins before that, but until then, they kind of had Cousins was a big deal, obviously, but they kind of were surviving that for a while. They just weren't that good. They were okay. They were an okay
Yeah.
team.
Yeah, I agree with you, and as I said, look out for next year. Although you
Yeah.
look at the schedule at home, if you better be able to win against that schedule, because
Yeah.
it looks pretty easy.
Is this the is this the third
But if you're
place?
the
Did
fourth
they get a
best
third
team,
place schedule or a fourth place schedule? I can't remember what they would get with. I think the Bears still
did
technically
they end
finished
up
last, right? Because
did they end up tying the Bears 7-10
they're both 7-10, but I think the Bears had like a easier schedule, so the Vikings
schedule?
win on strength of schedule or something like that. Because the Vikings had the first place schedule this year. But yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of the NFL. We always say, it's a it's a bounce back league. These teams are up and down. A lot of that's because you play an easier schedule when you're bad. The next year you get the softer schedule, which you probably should. It's fine.
By
But
the way, I tweeted this out, X'd it out late last night. I went back and looked. The Detroit Lions were 7-1-1 against the Vikings to start with, right? So that
back
got
into
us to the
history,
middle of
yeah.
1965. Since then, the Vikings are 79, 36, and
Whew.
1 against Detroit. And this is only so they've had 115 games since that start.
Yeah.
This is only Detroit's fourth three-game winning streak against the
Wow.
Vikings in 115 games, and none have ever exceeded 3 games since then.
Wow.
So this is right now we're sitting on the longest losing streak, the equal of the longest losing streak against the Lions since 1965. So that's a distinction that I think we don't give. We really, how everybody says we don't talk enough about this.
Yeah.
That people are saying we don't talk enough about how rotten the Lions have always been and how amazing this season is. Right?
Yeah.
Now the dummy loses his tight end Laporta. He had to ruin his knee. He might never play, but. I mean, he's a goofball, but man alive, I have never been as surprised for a coach to be successful as him. And he might burn him out sometime, but I thought he was a lunatic.
He comes in right away with the kneecaps thing, right? Bite your kneecaps off, and he becomes a punchline, but then they get better. Yeah.
Oh, they were 1-6, and last year that 1-6, they kicked away about 3 of those games. They just were. They had
won them to the Vikings.
They were opposite of the Vikings. That they had games won and they lost them rather than vice versa. But I think it's kind of fun that the Lions are good now.
Yeah,
the Packers are always going to be
okay.
The Packers,
yeah.
and the Bears are okay. Let's have a strong division once.
Yeah, let's try it.
A weak division, wouldn't it be something?
Yeah, if Vikings aren't careful, they could go 4-13 next year. I mean, geez, if you got those tough division games, you're right that the schedule's easier. I don't know. All depends on what they do. It's fun. This is a fun off season. This is last year they were kind of running it back. This is the speculation of the next 2 to 3 months before free agency and before the draft are going to be off the charts this year for the Vikings because there's just a lot of volatility.
And we will be after that. This is the great thing about the NFL. No matter how rotten you are, unless you've traded away your draft choices, you're optimistic again on April 30th or whatever it is. The draft is next to the Super Bowl. The draft's the biggest thing in the league. Now, I think they've been stupid by spreading it out like a month.
Right.
But the fact that you regenerate your fans every year with the draft, and you're always. I mean, you draft Christian Ponder and Trent Dilfer tells you that you screwed up, and everybody gets mad at Trent Dilfer because we're always optimistic, and that football is they got the great renewal every year at the draft, and come May, this whole 7-10 flop will be forgotten, and will be I can't wait to see whoever the quarterback, Bo Nix or somebody like that.
And the best part is
going to be Jaron Hall, though.
And the best part is they have to decide on Cousins before the draft is going to happen. So we'll have some.
Yes. Yeah.
Or at least I think they would.
They have no hold on him at all, right?
No,
he's a free agent.
He's a free agent. He is a free agent. He is an absolute free agent.
He'll end up saying he's not going to come. They're not going to bring him back. I'm boldly predicting they're not bringing him back.
I think you're right. I think if they're being honest, at least they'll say, you know what, he probably gives them the best chance to win in 2024. But what does that mean? What's the value of that? You got to cut it off at some point. If you're not going to be that good in the next 2 years, which they're not a contender in the next 2 years, I don't think. Then it's time to move on. Speaking of time to move on. Oh, go ahead.
If you're Kirk and watched yesterday's game and saw what happened to
he was there,
you might want to be back then.
No,
you might want to say on second thought, I want to go somewhere where I might live. So God, it was a sprint to the It
It
was a
was.
sprint to the quarterback yesterday. Hey,
Uh,
Detroit is interesting, though. They don't cover the tight end ever, do they?
no, it's
I
like,
mean,
man. Well,
Johnny
would you
Munt's our
cover
biggest
Johnny? Would you
weapon.
cover Johnny Munt and Nick
They don't.
Muse?
They don't. Who's the other tight end?
Josh Oliver.
Their biggest plays for these two games have been like
Yes.
wide open tight ends
Right.
for 30 yards. It's
Right.
unbelievable.
We'll give you the tight end. We'll give you the
Yeah.
tight end.
All right.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
The PWHL started up. We don't have a name, but man, 13,000 people showed up. That was the announced figure anyway at XL. They win 3-0. This is the thing about this. I had Rachel on Friday's show, and she was talking about how professional this league seems, and I get that vibe too. This is different than what they've tried before.
Oh, yeah. And they just started. They got Sperling as one of their advisors. That's a good place to start, and he's a genius. And he set up the Wild. He's helped set up the Timberwolves when they first came in here. He's the best. And my granddaughter went 14. She was thrilled. She loved it. She loved it. And, a hockey player. And, they're not going to have 13 the next time, but they might have 5 or 6, which is going to be more than anybody expected. And Natalie Darwitz, I love that kid. She's not a kid anymore,
No,
but
she's
she's a kid to me, man. She did one of the blurbs on the book we did.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And she's the only one that wrote her own. I wrote the others for the people. She wrote her own, but her and I are old buddies. When she was in Turin, Italy, I was talking to her on the cell phone a few times. And she had an Uncle Steve who's a beauty, because the Darwitzes, she grew up in Egan, but the Darwitzes, they're old West 7th family, from back there downtown. And she used to call up Uncle Steve and tell him what happened and whether she scored a goal. And the games were all on replay. And Steve would go down to the bars on West 7th and bet guys that Natalie would get a goal pretty soon, and she'd get a goal. So they were ripping off guys for free beers for Uncle Steve and stuff like that.
She's terrific.
She's a good blue collar kid that that's kicked around a little bit. But she was going to want to come back and coach Bethel, was it? Bethel. And then this thing popped up, and you can't blame him for taking the job. But, and the great thing they have going for them is you got to get, just figure out a way to get the 4 best Gophers every year, and you're going to be pretty good. I mean, we got another Zumwinkle playing here, don't we? We got one on this team, and isn't there a younger ones? And
I can't remember. Grace is the one on this team, and she's pretty good. I can't remember what.
Yeah.
What their
she had 3, and they got Heisey too, who's a great player. And
we got the goalies. And the goalies are good.
You got to make sure you get Abby Murphy though. You got to make sure you get her, because she is. I'd go watch her if she's playing, because we might have we might turn into the Broad Street Bullies.
Right.
We got her.
The old North Stars, man. Too, yeah.
I always said, I went over and saw her. I might go see her this weekend again against Ohio State. But I said the other day, she could start a riot in a nunnery. She's feisty, man. She's a Irish kid from, the Evergreen Park, which is right next to the south side of Chicago. And her brother's a killer wrestler at St. Cloud State. I got to figure out, there's got to be some stories about those Irish kids growing up together and fighting to see who gets the car and stuff like that. So anyway, that was great. I mean, it's fantastic. That it was, had I known 13,000 were going to be there, I might have shown up just to look at the scene. I wish I'd done that. But
me too. Well, the other chance, you're right. They're not going to get 13 for most of these games, but you're right. If they can maintain a certain level throughout the season. And then, yeah, that's what Rachel was saying. Like they've put some money into this league. They're paying the players
and they're just
not exorbitant salaries, but enough that
but
it's
something. Yeah,
enough that you
they
can
don't
kind of
have.
make this a big part of what you do instead of having to make this kind of a side gig. And it's
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. We've got a lot going on here with our scene. But
And
if people want to see it, if
might,
the market supports it, the market supports it, and that's
you
great.
know what might be smart is not having nicknames this year because you can sell them jerseys this year that say Minnesota on them, and then you
There you
can turn
go.
around and sell them the ones with the names.
Right.
You got a name yet? I haven't figured. I'm trying to figure out what a good name is,
I
but
don't know.
that's the other thing there. Sperling, I can see his genius there, and some of them. Let's not rush into
Right.
nicknames here. Let's just start the league, and
Right.
then we get the big summer unveil
Right.
of what everybody's nicknames are, and maybe add a couple more teams. But it's very smart to just start with six. And I got to tell you, I was at a girls' hockey game yesterday. It's the fact that they don't check them. They can bump
Right.
and do, but it allows in a lot of ways it allows the game to flow more because it's all about puck handling now instead of just trying to physically so it's very watchable. It's very watchable. Isn't it amazing though that you go back, this only started in the mid-90s.
I know.
Started
Yeah.
in the mid-90s. You'd go to
Yeah.
a game and they'd shoot a puck at the girl in the net and she'd look through her legs to see if it went through her or not.
Right.
Now they're playing like this. It's a great game. I'm impressed, and they've slapped that team together in a hurry, and we might have the powerhouse of the 6-team league.
I hope so. That'd be kind of cool. Hey, before we get to Billy Gardner at the end, I got to share with you my ongoing hockey pet peeve, as long as we're talking about hockey. Marc-Andre Fleury now has tied Patrick Waugh on the all-time wins list for second place. We've been making such a big deal about this all year that he's approaching Patrick Waugh. Now he's tied him for second place. Why, Patrick? Why is this such a big deal? Why do we care so much that he's going to be second? Why do we care so much?
I don't know. I don't know. Plus, the other thing, in one way, you get a lot more wins. How many ties did Patrick Reusse have? Because they don't play overtime. Because you get the free. You get to win the other day because the game goes into overtime. If it's Patrick Reusse, he's probably got. Of course, Fleury's got ties on his record too. But
yeah, because that old. But yeah.
I wonder how many ties. There's another completely distorted statistical thing. This is the most points. Well, yeah, the first decade they were here, they didn't get free tie. You didn't get free points when a tie was a tie. So that's another thing. But yeah, it's not exactly like he's been here and part of our lives for 20 years or something. It's good for him, and he seems to be a really good guy. I like the other guy though, because he was a lunatic as a coach. Patrick Reusse when he was in Colorado. I saw the first game he ever coached for some reason. I was watching it some night, and he's like throwing sticks on the ice and ripping stuff up. He's a lunatic. And of course, the greatest moment in Wild history is when they beat him that game out in Colorado. Yeah, Bruno beat him. Is Bruno still coaching the league or not? He had a coaching job. I don't know if he's a head coach.
If he's coached before, he'll coach again, Patrick, because there's only allowed to be 38 coaches in all of the NHL, and the guys that have to sit out for a little while, they'll be back soon enough, right?
Yeah,
that's
Evison. We're all rooting for Evison to be before the season's over. But anyway, one more thing we should mention: Gopher hoops too.
Gopher hoops before we get to Billy Gardner. 3-1 in the Big Ten. I had Marcus on Thursday last week before the Michigan game. We were talking about the opportunity here. They'd played a bunch of, no disrespect, they played a bunch of nobodies in the non-conference season. They had the lowest rated non-conference schedule.
Disrespect.
Yeah, we can disrespect. Lowest of all.
Was it? Ken Palm said it was the worst. Of 352
362, 352. Yeah, it was bad.
Schedule. Yeah, it was terrible, and he was supposed to go play in a good tournament out in Vegas too, and backed out of it. But the greatest break they ever was Marcus's godson, Dennis Evans, didn't come and play here.
His godson. Oh man, Marcus must hate you when you say that.
He ended up. I mean, what?
Yeah,
He was averaging 1 point a game. I don't know if he's having a physical problem or an emotional problem, but he's out of the Louisville program because he went home.
Yeah,
and he's having now. I don't know if he's a lot of those big guys have some problems, but the guy was when he was playing, he did nothing.
Right.
And 1 point a game or something. And meanwhile, up front, they got 3 guys I like.
Those are 3 good bigs. Yeah.
I don't want to mess with Farrell Payne.
He's good. I like watching him play.
Not only is he good, gets that look on his face like he might throw you in the second deck if you mess with him too much. So it's this old time.
He could have played for Clem. He could have played for Clem.
He could have played for Clem. Clem would have loved this front line.
Yes.
He might have gotten on Dawson's back about not being physical enough, but he'd love Ola Joseph and Payne. They would have been Clem players, man. Payne's got. You look at Payne and he's Courtney James. It's the same guy.
Maybe that's how I need to start judging how much I like players on the Gopher basketball team. Could I picture them playing for Clem Haskins? I could Elijah Hawkins, who didn't look like much in the first 4 or 5 games of the year. I like him a lot now.
How about that 3 throw in? That pretty much, were you watching? That pretty much won the game for him because the clock was running down. They're going to let him go, and he flipped that one in. Now, Mitchell didn't do anything yesterday, but Carrington played okay. And, they got decent
Christie
guards.
Gave him something yesterday. He's good.
And they got, Christie's okay. And they got, here's the problem. If you play good, there's going to be guys in there trying to poach. So you're going to have to come up with some money. So they got a little bit of money for Payne and Ola Joseph, I heard. And, but we got to remember the Dinkytown Collective, all the money's going right to PJ. So they got to get somebody to help them out on basketball because even more so than football, of course, you get the transfers hurt you a lot more in basketball than they do in football. But it's nice to, I guess this assistant Jenkins,
I'm not sure.
Is a pretty good recruiter, and he kind of got the 2 transfers in here, and the quality of transfers is a little higher than it was 2 years ago. And they were, they had some guys who played their guts out for him 2 years ago, but guys who were coming from Monmouth and places like that. I mean, these are decent programs that they got. Howard's picked it up a little, and they got some players. They got 7 or 8, 9 players. Einen and Fox aren't playing much, but they're
not bad when they do. They've got enough there. They got
4 guards, and then they got a back, and then they got 5 guys they can play up front. So good for them.
3-1 of the Big Ten. Go ahead.
That was an ugly game. I mean, they only had 24 points right before halftime. So, but that's okay. That's kind of with that physical front, the way they got to play. So,
they might win 7 or 8 Big Ten games this year, right? If they already got 3.
The only trouble is their schedule is so rotten that their strength of schedule is so rotten. They got to win about 11 to make the tournament, I would think. So, that's not realistic, but. If you get to go to the NIT this year, you get, that's okay. He's making progress.
That'd be a step.
Everybody had him fired, and I don't think that was going to be fair at all. You can't. I wrote this for Saturday, but he's the guy who had the true year 0.
Yes,
I mean, because they had nobody left.
He almost had 2 in a row because everybody left and then everybody left again. It's like all the guys they brought in were just 1-year Band-Aids. Like it took a while to get this thing going. He came in at the absolute worst time under the absolute worst circumstances, like right in the middle of COVID and just like nothing going.
Transfer portal going crazy. I mean, everybody, and then it became a thing. They had a bunch of guys transfer that wouldn't have played anywhere else. Where were they going? They had 5 of the 10 guys that left didn't end up playing hardly. I'll tell you what hurt them a lot right away when the Kelcher kid decided to transfer to Iowa State because that was going to be anyway. He's got some foundation going. He's got a pretty good staff. from what I understand. And, let's. Yeah, I don't know if there's this great burgeoning crowd waiting to go to Gopher basketball again. I think through the years, it'll never be like it was 20 years ago. But it's certainly better, and that was a nice win yesterday.
It was. Hey, let's get to Billy Gardner quick before we go. I know you're writing about him for today. 96. That's a good run for a crusty old baseball man.
Don't tell me that chewing tobacco's bad for you.
I think maybe he was an outlier. I don't know. He might have been an outlier.
Addict. Yeah. He swallowed more chewing tobacco than anybody in beer, and he was a dead end guy, man. Can you imagine him when he was a kid? Because you look at him, he belongs in a motorcycle magazine, the 1950s motorcycle, movie with the Marlon Brando, The Wild Things. Yeah. I mean, just a dead end kid, poker, pool. He was just he ended up dying in the same town that he grew up in, Waterford, Connecticut. He and his wife's still alive, 71 years of marriage to him. God love her. She was Miss New London. I'm going to use this, but it might be my favorite quote ever. Charlie Walters got it from him, but it was great. He and Pod were rooming together, and Johnny just smoked like 400 cigarettes a day, and and he'd be smoking when the pitch would be warming up on the bullpen. In the spring training, he'd be smoking next to him. But see, he and I graduated from the same institution, St. Mary's. Pod went to St. Mary's, but he ended up drinking unlimited supply of a non-alcoholic beer. He had the taste, but anyway, Pod was rooming with Billy someplace at the end of spring training or something, But he'd kind of like sit on the register in the hotel room all night, smoke cigarettes and drink non-alcoholic beer and sleep about 2 hours.
Oh, my gosh.
And Slake's quote to Charlie was, "How would you like to be married to Miss Connecticut and you wake up in the morning and the first thing you see is Pod's blue head?"
Blue head. It's perfect.
The smoke,
yes, yes, I do.
Smoke behind him.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, God, his quotes were... he was just the best. I love the guy. He's absolutely, they wouldn't even this organization wouldn't let him do a walkthrough anymore.
Right. He was not made for the modern era of the Twins.
Not made for the modern era at all. He was on the 54 Giants. He didn't play much, but he was a kid. And then he was on he won 2 World Series, 54 Giants. And then after here, he won something. And there's a thing on Saber, which they do some great profiles.
Oh, sure.
And they got one from 2014 on him that's really good, long one. And, even some things I didn't really know about him. But he always called his wife Miss Connecticut, but she was actually Miss London. But his kid, Billy Jr. has been managing. I think he's in the independent league now. No, I guess he managed Beloit last year, but for Marlins. But his kid, I used to call up the house, and his kid would answer the phone, and you swear to God it was Billy. The voice was the same. Everything was the same. Now, I don't know how his health was the last few years because I hadn't heard much. But the thing about him is he died Wednesday. And nobody really saw it until Sunday. Somebody tweeted it out. Because the obit. So it's not, I think the Twins, didn't have a lot of people working over the holidays. Might have been the reason that it took so long for us to find out he died. But 96 and a half. TK, I called up TK and told a couple of great stories too about him because he was his third base coach.
Oh, he took over for him, right, in 86? Yeah.
No, he took over for the Rockies. Oh, no. They fired Slick and brought in,
that's right.
Ray Miller.
That's right. Sorry. Ray
Miller. And Slick Sinkerball and I were out at the hotel at the Super 8 with him in his hotel room. we're sitting there talking to him. He's packing up, getting ready to go back, and the phone rings. He says, "Must be Reagan." It was the president, who was the president. Calling. He never didn't have a quip. I mean, I love it. I've called him then, and I'm writing something right now.
Yeah.
But to me, he's the Burnsy of baseball.
That's a good comparison. Yeah,
now,
same era too. Yeah,
Burnsy took 40 years to establish himself as a local character, but
right.
Slick was only here 5. But they're the same guy. They made you laugh without really trying to, because they were just. And I was telling you some about it. Unfortunately, 80% of what he said you could never use in modern America.
Yes, that is true too.
His insensitivity was, and it wasn't insensitivity. It was, I grew up in Connecticut in a family without much money and on the water, and we said anything we wanted to, So
yeah.
But he was a great guy. I loved him. So
and he had to manage Ron Davis. So you know what?
Yeah,
there you go.
Right. Yeah. Ron Davis was you never far from a Ron Davis joke when you were around Slick. So anyway,
all right, Patrick.
Okay.
I'll let you go back to writing that, because I'm sure there's going to be some good, some even better stories in that as well. Appreciate everything today, and we'll talk next week. And we don't even have to talk about a Vikings game next week. Well, we can spend time on other things. We can move on with our lives.
Go Michigan! Win one for Harbaugh. Make everybody mad. It's great.
Thanks, Patrick.
See ya.